Right, no, maybe... Wait. This is Beauty Nova. She's just a trainer among many other very French NPCs in Pokémon X and Y with one small difference. You probably never fought her. Actually, my hot take with source being vibes is that more players have come across random shinies in Kalos than challenged Beauty Nova to a battle. And I mean, it's not like the odds of finding her are 1 in 4096, but Beauty Nova can only be challenged in the Battle Maison, an endgame battle facility where you must defeat 20 trainers in a row. If you take this challenge in normal mode, which you would usually only do once if at all in a regular playthrough, there are 110 possible trainers you can fight against. Beauty Nova can only be your opponent in fight 16, 17, 18, or 19. This big pool of diverse optional NPCs at the end of the game means that there are tiny gems of dialogue, small stories, slices of life in the Pokémon world that you will probably never see. Unless you are actually looking for it to fill up a Wikipedia page or write a YouTube video, like a rich kid whose mom chose his Pokémon for him, or a painter talking about trends in Pokémon contemporary art. When you need to write dialogue for 110 trainers in a late game battle facility, you will often opt for funny bubbles instead of something with deep implications to the lore of the world you are building, but that's not the case with Beauty Nova. She is by far the most discussed NPC from this facility, I would argue even more than the Battle Shadow Lanes, because of her impact in the world building of Pokemon. Because Nova gives us a small, very much official look at how the queer people of the Pokemon world live. Because she's one of those trends, and not in a headcanon kind of way, not in an implied subtext kind of way, not in a, wow, look, this character is hot and wearing a tie, is it a non-binary lesbian? Let me guess. No, Nova is a beauty. Just like any of the dozens of beauties you fought before in the game, with the difference that she used to be a black belt. An exclusively male trainer class. She doesn't say she used to be a battle girl, no, she says black belt. In Japanese, it's even more explicit. Beauty Nova says she used to be a karate king. Her dialogue in English reads, "I've recently remade my life completely. I've been reborn as a beauty at last." If she wins, she tells the player, "If you want to make your dreams reality, then you have to be completely dedicated." If she loses, she says, "Yes, a mere half year ago, I was a black belt." Quite the transformation, wouldn't you say? Oh, I would. This small dialogue bubble not only makes her the only trans character, but the only textually explicit LGBT character in any mainline Pokemon game. Sure, Wallace and Steven are probably dating, but is this ever said out loud? No. Meanwhile, Beauty Nova's transition is clear as day and not open for debate or interpretation. Standing out in a series or an international brand that, even with a huge queer player base, often tries to stay as family-friendly as possible, avoiding themes of gender or sexuality. For an endgame NPC that most people will never meet, that's kind of huge. And I don't think there are any videos on the internet saying anything other than she exists. Isn't that neat? So today, dear Stranger Online, I think a deep dive into what she means for Pokemon is very much due. Today, I want to learn everything there is to learn about Beauty Nova, and try to understand just how much thought was given by Game Freak when including this NPC as an optional fight in a late game stage. Beauty Nova is a glimmer of hope for queer people in confirming that yes, Pokemon trainers can also transition and live fulfilling lives in this fantasy world that we love. Did Game Freak understand the weight of this inclusion? Was it made with genuine heart, a nugget of representation to queer fans? Or was Beauty Nova just a small gag, an afterthought in the game's massive script? I wanted to get some footage for this video, so I hosted a live stream on this little channel, trying to find Beauty Nova, almost like a shiny hunt. And I managed to find her under odds after about 60 trainers battled. So I got quite acquainted with the Battle Maison's NPCs, and most of them have very basic dialogue. Someone will talk about losing weight, someone will talk about how expensive Paris is, and someone else will talk about how much they love Pokemon. Me too, buddy. Me too. My impression after hours in the Maison is that Beauty Nova is one of the only ones, if not the only trainer, with dialogue that actually adds to Pokemon's world building. And the original dialogue in Japanese has even more impact. Nova says, "I have been reborn, and I've been reborn as a beauty." And "I was a karate king just half a year ago. The power of medical science is awesome, wouldn't you say?" literally mentioning medical science, and there are still people in my comment section trying to say, oh, she isn't trans, she was just a female karate king before. Like, what is going on with the internet's media literacy? The really cool aspect here is that her gender transition is reinforced by her intentional linguistic code switching and a very specific choice of words. I am no Japanese expert, so I talked to fellow content creator Pokesutami, whose incredible channel is the absolute reference in looking at Pokemon through a more Japanese lens and seeing things that are often lost in translation. You definitely should give it a follow, but in Japanese, speech and words heavily communicate the speaker's gender identity, age, and background, with many dialects, accents, and different genders using different words. It's not like men only use one set of words and women only use another, but it's strongly indicative of their identities. Women who use more traditionally masculine words can often be seen as tomboys, or maybe they work in male-dominated fields, for example. A bit of a tangent here, but I'm sorry, I'm so obsessed with Pokopia, and I used a lot of that in Pokopia. In the English version of the game, literally every single Pokemon uses they/them pronouns. Based. I will explore that more in my Pokopia video in a few weeks. Subscribe to watch it as soon as it's out. But in the Japanese version of Pokopia, this linguistic code is ostensibly used to convey character personality. According to what I could find, Bulbasaur and Ivysaur, by the word choice, speak as if they were schoolgirls, while Venusaur is their older sister who was a fashionista in the 90s but now has a fancy job. Kyogre speaks like an old man, or a super ancient Pokemon, you know? And according to channel subscriber Bafira, and I quote, Slowpoke is a himbo. This linguistic code, or choice of words that communicate who a character is deconstructed very cleverly with Beauty Nova. Her first dialogue is hyper-feminine in a way. She uses the pronoun atashi, which is traditionally used by women. Ending a sentence with the explanatory particle no and an exclamation point is a classic marker of joseigo, a very feminine manner of speech. However, when she loses, the pressure of the battle makes her slip a little bit into a more masculine act. To say amazing, she uses the word sugeyone, which is characteristically masculine, rather than the feminine alternatives like sugoyone or sugoyawa. I'm sorry, I'm murdering all of these pronunciations. The developers even spelled the feminine atashi and the masculine suge in katakana, rather than using the proper kanji to emphasize this speech quirk. It's some small details that make this intention even clearer, very specific Japanese cultural details that simply could not have been translated into English in any way. But, well, could have been worse because the German and Korean localizations chose to censor this dialogue altogether, turning her from a black belt into a female Pokemon breeder or a Taekwondo girl. Boo, Germany, boo! Very bad of you both. I think that something fun to observe is that Nova is not the first trainer to change trainer classes. Trainer classes are fluid in a way, and every single trainer is supposed to change classes as they grow, change jobs, and become more experienced in battle, a kind of natural progression in the Pokemon world. This was actually confirmed in a Gold and Silver interview by Ken Sugimori and Koji Nishino. The interviewer asks, trainers have more individuality in Gold and Silver, don't they? Sugimori says, yes, they do. We made it so that trainers would use a particular set of Pokemon depending on their occupation. And Nishino adds, the trainers have a lot of little details as well. When a schoolboy grows up, he turns into a super nerd, for example, while a lass becomes a beauty. It never comes up in the story, but it's in the game nonetheless. Nova's transition isn't just a quirky line of dialogue, but in a way, an actual function of the game's world-building mechanics. Beauty Nova probably got her first Pokemon as a kid, as a schoolboy. She grew up to become a black belt, as we are all aware, and then, through the power of medical science, became a beauty. All that progress in literally 6 months, the hair growth and body mass loss is insane. HRT in the Pokemon world is wild. I wonder what he put in that bread she's carrying, but anyway, her natural progression would probably be to go on and become maybe an ace trainer, and eventually graduate to a veteran. Every trainer in the Pokemon world just keeps on transitioning. But to be honest, none of this tells me what I'm really interested in exploring here. Why do we have Beauty Nova?
Why is Gamora?
What does her inclusion in a Pokemon game mean? Maybe I could look for clues at Beauty Nova's team, because which Pokemon a trainer uses is very often a storytelling strategy used by the writers to convey a motivation or a characteristic, like the couple with the Onyx and Cloyster or the infamous Blue's Raticate is actually dead theory. Understanding which Pokemon they gave to a former black belt who became a beauty might give us some insight in what that transformation means for the character, which doesn't help us at all because Nova doesn't really have a fixed team. Actually, none of the trainers in the Maison do. They all have a pool of possible Pokemon that they can bring to a fight. And Nova, alongside presumably cisgender beauties such as Beauty Maeve, Belinda, and Nohea, can all pull from a pool of 38 perfectly EV-trained Pokemon. She's just like the other girls, you know? She just likes VGC a bit too much. What's wrong with that? Well, the randomness kind of lets you shape your own story, because when I fought Nova, she brought to the fight Harley's Cacturne, iconic, alongside, I kid you not, Blahaj the Shark, and her ace was Sliggoo. Whether you like it or not, Sliggoo is a trans icon now. I think what makes me overly cautious of Beauty Nova is that Japanese media has a strong tradition of including gender-bending storylines in its fiction. Understanding Japan's cultural view and representation of gender-diverse people is an extremely daunting task that may fit better in a future video, but what we know is that sometimes this is done earnestly, with heart and respect. Think of the natural way your name treats its gender swap storyline, or the incredibly deep inside Mari. But I mean, you've watched anime before, and you know that sometimes gender is bent as a joke, or as a gotcha, or as a way to trick a straight character in the story. I'm sorry, comment section, but it's One Piece. I know you all love it, and it changed, and it's anime filler, and it's much better now, but I'm sorry, it's the best example of what I'm talking about. Not very cool. No wonder the term trap comes from 4chan anime boards, and I don't know, I guess I've watched way too much anime and read way too many YouTube comments to be a little bit hesitant when taking any kind of representation at face value. I'm sorry, my little binary cave brain always feels the need to categorize trans characters into one of those boxes. Sensei and Tangerine? Good. The Danish girl? Bad. And what are other clear examples of transgender characters in Pokemon might be rare and not help much with our analysis, there are many examples of cross-dressing characters instead in the Pokemon games. And that is linked to Japan's tradition of treating gender as a theatrical performance. We will talk more about that in a future video, but Japanese theater has a very strong tradition of both men playing female characters and women playing male characters, the Onagata and the Otokoyaku, an all-female musical theater. Let them cook. But anyway, cross-dressing in Pokemon dates back to Gen 1, with the Copycat and Saffron mimicking Red. And later we have Looker disguising himself as your mom. While both of these are definitely intended to be a gotcha moment, the gender swap doesn't sound like mockery to me at first glance. Meanwhile, something much more interesting to analyze here is Nursery Aide June, whom I had never heard of before researching for this video, and it's actually wild that I never heard of them before because, well, look at my channel. It sounds like I should. Have you? Nursery Aide June is one of the trainers you can meet in the Nimbasa City Rendezvous Ferris wheel. These trainers change by the season, and June, as the name implies, is the one you fight in summer. Let me just read you a direct translation of the Japanese dialogue, thanks to the Cantopia blog for providing these. Phew, I guess I should have expected it to be this hot in the summer. Are you okay, little Nate? Your face is as red as a Pansear. Here, just take off your jacket and you'll cool down. We're both guys, so there's no need to be shy. Oh, did I forget to mention that? I'm a man. You see, they were only hiring women where I work, so I had no choice but to go through with this. I was told if I wanted this job, I'd have to be a woman. That's right, I went this far to get this job. If I just up and quit now, then all this would have been for nothing. Hey, thanks for hearing me out. I feel more motivated now, thanks to you. Yeah, like, this is literally the plot of Victor Victoria. How have I not heard it before? Well, probably because this was censored in the English version, so there we go again. In English, June only rambles about wanting to quit their job, which, while relatable, it loses every single ounce of personality this interaction had. What's up with you all, localization teams? And surprisingly enough, some countries decided to stay close to the original text, including Germany! Bravo, Germany! Bravo! According to Bubapedia, in the Japanese version, all the conversations are often laced with double entendres, and June only appears if you're playing as the male character, so make of that what you will, but I think this is all super flirty. Nate had a cute date with a femboy in a Ferris wheel, and you know what? We stan. But I think that June and Nova are not only fundamentally different because of, well, Nova is a woman and June is a man, but June feels like a well-known type of story, reminiscent of gender-bending films of the 80s, be it Tootsie, Mrs. Doubtfire, or Shakespeare in Love. Never forget. While not trans stories and definitely closer to a stereotypical ridicule of breaking gender conventions, there is also some inherent queerness here. Mostly in Victor Victoria, like Julie Andrews, the absolute icon you are, which is probably why it was censored in the English version. Really curious to think that Nursery Aide June was an issue while Beauty Nova wasn't, but if I had to guess, I would say it has to do with the flirty undertones of the Ferris wheel being very date-coded. And unfortunately, I think that's as deep as my dive goes with Beauty Nova. I did search in Japanese websites and blogs, but couldn't find Nova being cited in any sort of interview or behind-the-scenes documentation, which is honestly kind of expected from such a small NPC, exclusive to the late game. While I would love to end this video with a definitive conclusion of Beauty Nova is good representation or Beauty Nova is bad representation, the truth is, I just don't know. I don't know why Beauty Nova was added to Pokémon X and Y. Maybe it was a self-insert. Maybe it was made by a writer who has a queer kid and wanted the Pokémon world to feel like it was a place for them too. If a writer would like to see more diversity in the world in a way that wouldn't affect the story and would be easier to get approved by higher-ups, an endgame battle facility dialogue which might not even be seen by players seems like the perfect way to do it, but this is all speculation. It can also just be done for laughs, as an unexpected dialogue to break the ice with the player after 19 battles in a row, but it certainly doesn't feel much like it. It's not as in-your-face as a punchline would usually be. It's honestly very casual, very natural, and I think that is also good. A character mentioning a gender transition with no big fuss around it, just like the other NPCs that were talking about dieting, art, or how much they love their Pokemon. Silly little stories with the kind of chillness that could only be found in a game from 2013, before the trans question became a matter of heavily politicized debates and national security. Maybe that's what I'm failing to see. I think I'm so traumatized with how much energy is spent in 2026 debating over trans people in media, trans rights being taken away, that I'm getting overly defensive when I see something as casual and simple as a T-girl saying, "Thanks Arceus and medicine for having cinched my waist." I think it's a lesson for Cecily that you don't need to have your character shout, "Trans rights are human rights," for them to be good representation, for them to inspire people positively. Because differently from the genderqueer representations of, say, One Piece, Beauty Nova doesn't look different from any other beauties. Her team isn't different from any other beauties. She's literally just like the other girls, and there is value in that. And the intention of her inclusion by the writers, whether it was genuine or a gag, can only be speculated. The really important thing, and that is material reality, is the positive impact she has had in the queer Pokemon fanbase. I posted a short showcasing my battle with her, and the overwhelming amount of messages from queer people being ecstatic about Nova is heartwarming. Comments like, "Beauty Nova, my beloved, she means so much to me, quite the transformation indeed," or "The Pokemon world is the kind of world I wanna live in," is definitely a breath of fresh air, mostly when you can imagine the type of comments that I tend to get in videos where gender queerness is at the forefront. Honestly, even though the Pokemon community is extremely queer inclusive, it is still a very popular franchise that calls the attention of weirdos everywhere. It's often really hard, mostly with the current political situation, to talk about these questions that are dear to us with openness and clarity. In the last few days in the Pokemon community, there were multiple cases of trans people being horribly harassed, both online and in in-person events, because of their gender identity. Hey, we don't even need to go too far. I get my own fair share of death threats on a fairly regular basis, and recently, someone has created a fake email account to send harassment to people in my name. The internet is a normal and healthy place. But this is why Beauty Nova is so important, because she's incontestable proof. She was a karate king, and now she is a beauty. She's happy, she's thriving, and she is one of the strongest trainers in all of Kalos. Even though Sylvia Plath swept her with choice packs, but I mean, girlie, why did you only bring dark types to a battle? I'm sorry. Having uncontestable proof of a queer character that is not hidden in subtext but is queer, clear as day, is unbelievably important in protecting trans people in fandom and in online communities, and proving that while real-life politics and bigotry might try to scare us, push us away, and prevent us from even existing in public spaces, we are here. We are also part of this world, of the Pokemon world. And that's why we need vocal allies in this community. We need trans Pokemon content creators talking about things that are dear to us, because the Pokemon world always has space for people like us. And I think this type of realization is important for me too. It doesn't matter if someone thinks that I'm taking topics too seriously when I tackle misogyny, transphobia, and homophobia. Yeah, it is that deep, bro. Art is always deep because it's always made by complex people, and it's not because you are a shallow sad person who is scared of deep waters that is going to stop me and all the strangers online that are joining me into going head deep in things that are important to us. I don't care if you think that it's cringe that I want to tell trans stories. I'm not going to shut up. Inspiring people is important. Because more important than online harassment that I can block away are the very real life and blood dozens of queer people that stopped me in the middle of Carnaval in Brazil just to tell me how much they love my work. And it's honestly a privilege to experience this kind of real life interactions. The trans videos are gonna keep coming. Oh yeah, I have quite a few that I still want to make. Bigots are going to have to keep dropping hate messages in my comment section for a while. As a really cool Pokemon trainer once said, if you want to make your dreams a reality, then you have to be completely dedicated. I've also been extensively corrected with people telling me that Blahaj is pronounced Blaui, but I apologize to Mia Mulder and the Kingdom of Sweden, saying Blahaj is much more fun. I'm from Brazil, we don't say Oxford, we say Oxford.